Good evening, everyone. My name is Ryan. Thank you for joining our live interactive telephone town hall. We are hosting tonight's event to give Congresswoman Spanberger the opportunity to hear directly from you and answer your questions about the issues facing Virginia's families, seniors, and economy. As I mentioned, this event is an interactive forum. Congresswoman Spanberger will be taking as many questions as she possibly can during the event. So if you have a question, please press *3 on your phone's keypad at any time. Again, that is *3 on your phone's keypad. You'll be placed in line to speak with a member of the Congresswoman's staff. They'll take down your name and where you're calling from so that the next time you hear your name, you'll actually be live on the call with the Congresswoman. You'll be able to ask her your question directly. You can also ask a question by submitting one through the portal below our online streaming player at spanberger.house.gov. Again, that's spanberger.house.gov/LIVE. One more time, spanberger.house.gov/live. There's a broadcast there, and again, underneath the streaming player, you can ask your question. Additionally, if you'd like to receive updates from the office via email, you can press *6 on your phone's keypad, *6, and an operator will collect your email address for the newsletter. We could receive a lot of questions during the event, so if we're not able to address it, you can call the district office at 703-987-2180 during normal business hours. Again, if you have any questions throughout the event, please press *3 on your phone's keypad or just type them below the streaming player. Now, please welcome Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger.
Good evening. I'm Abigail Spanberger, and I am so proud to serve Virginia's 7th District in the U.S. House of Representatives. I want to thank you all for joining tonight's event, which is focused on hearing your thoughts on how we can better support Virginia families, businesses, seniors, and our overall economy. It's been a busy week so far in Virginia. Just yesterday, I visited several farms across Caroline and King George counties. In our conversations, we talked about the priorities of the producers for this year's Farm Bill, the 2023 Farm Bill. The Farm Bill is legislation that is passed every 5 years to support America's producers and rural communities, but it has an impact on people across the country and certainly across the entirety of the 7th District. I am the only Virginian serving on the House Agriculture Committee, so getting this bipartisan bill done through the House, through the Senate, and to the President's desk remains a top priority for me in the coming weeks and months. I also want to acknowledge that I know we likely have many federal employees on the line, and so I want to make clear that as we approach the end of September, the end of the fiscal year, I am committed to making sure that Congress does our job and avoids a potential shutdown. There has been some talk of it in the news, and so I want to make my position clear. Shutdowns are bad for Virginia's economy. Shutdowns are bad for Virginia's families. They threaten, frankly, the very function of our government, and that's why I am concerned and have been concerned that some of my colleagues appear to be playing some politics with the idea of a government shutdown. So I am raising the alarm early, making sure that in the halls of Congress, we are focused on getting our appropriations bills done, and that the very real threat and harm caused by government shutdowns, certainly to people, to the community, and to the constituents I represent, is very clear. It's also why I continue to advocate for my bipartisan bill that would stop lawmakers from getting paid in the event of a shutdown. It is indeed true and absolutely unthinkable that when the government shuts down, members of Congress and the Senate still get paid. If Virginians and Virginia businesses that work to support our federal employees don't get paid and are harmed and impacted and in many cases facing really challenging circumstances, even with the mere threat of a shutdown, I want to make sure that members of Congress feel that same impact. So finally, I also want to share some news about a recent milestone that our office has reached. I'm proud to announce that we have now returned more than $33 million back to Virginians through our constituent casework. So this number represents the work of my team to secure backlogged benefits and delayed refunds for the Virginians that we serve. It means our neighbors in Virginia are finally getting what they are owed. And we do not want to stop at $33 million. So if you or a loved one has an issue with a federal agency or a challenge receiving a benefit that you are owed, please do not hesitate to reach out to my office. You can reach us via the telephone 703-987-2180, or you can go online to spanberger.house.gov. We are here to help you. So any challenges with federal agencies, Social Security, OPM, veterans, Medicare, please be in touch, and we look forward to seeing how we might be able to support you. Thank you again for being here tonight. And with that, I look forward to taking your questions.
Let's do that. Thank you, Congresswoman Spanberger, for those remarks. As a reminder to everyone on the call and on the broadcast, this forum is interactive, and we'd love to hear your questions. So if you have one, remember, press *3 on your phone's keypad at any point during the broadcast, *3, and *6 if you'd like to sign up for the newsletter. So we're going to go to our first caller. It looks like we have, I believe it's Donald. Donald, you have a question. We'll go ahead and just bring you live. You're live.
Thank you. Yes, Don Wood, Occoquan, Virginia. And Congresswoman Spanberger, you're doing a tremendous job.
Thank you.
A question about the Trust in Congress Act, which has been something you've championed now for at least one session, maybe two. Earlier, I think it was not brought to the floor. Is there a future for the Trust in Congress Act?
Don, thanks for this question. For those who are listening, let me just quickly tell you what the Trust in Congress Act is, if you haven't heard about it. It's a piece of legislation that I lead with a Republican congressman from Texas, and the principle of the bill is very straightforward. Our constituents should never, ever be reading in the news that members of Congress are selling this stock or buying that stock, and that it looks like there might have been impropriety taking place. I do not think that members of Congress should be able to buy or sell individual stocks. We have too many meetings with business leaders, industry leaders, CEOs, and we take too many votes that can impact or move markets. And certainly, as we saw in the early days of COVID, there was report after report of individuals in Congress, in the House of Representatives, in the Senate, selling this stock, buying this stock, and it really the perception of impropriety was strong, and I think the American people deserve better. So this is a piece of bipartisan legislation that would say we can't buy or sell individual stocks. If you come to Congress with stocks, you can either sell them, put them in mutual funds, or put it in a verified blind trust, and then you are removed from the direction of that. This legislation is interesting in that it is very bipartisan in its support. It's also a bit bipartisan in its opposition. Don's question was, what's the progress on it? We introduced it in 2020 in the 116th Congress, introduced it again in 2021 in the 117th, and now again in the 118th Congress. We now have well over 50 co-sponsors, kind of across the ideological spectrum, across the spectrum of time in Congress, across geographic distribution, and we are working to move this bill forward. Earlier this Congress, we had member hearings before the House Administration Committee, which is the committee that has jurisdiction over these issues. And I think an important step forward was both the chair and the ranking member spoke favorably in principle of this legislation. And that is a departure from years past. Certainly some of the challenges that we had is we had a prior Speaker of the House who expressed opposition, and we had leadership of that committee that also expressed opposition. So, having general admission of the value, at least in principle, of this legislation, I'm certainly not counting my chickens before they're hatched, but we are moving in the right direction. And most importantly, this is really the one issue that no matter where I go in our district, no matter what other issues are top of mind, this is an issue that comes up for the people I represent. And I know it's the same for so many of my colleagues across the country. So, Don, where we are is I'm continuing to push, continuing to get more co-sponsors on this legislation. There are companion pieces in the Senate. So this is a bill where House members and senators agree and we are working to move it forward. We are, when we return to Capitol Hill next month, going to be doing an additional push directly to the current Speaker of the House to try and get him to move this bill forward as well. So we continue to move on it, continue to gather co-sponsors, and the consensus is there that at least among the American people, we're just trying to make sure that Congress catches up. To me, this is just an issue of we have an obligation to make sure that the people we represent know we're working for you and not our stock portfolio. And the really easiest way to make that one clear is to not trade in a stock portfolio. So thank you for raising it, and look forward to giving you updates in the coming months that we're actually seeing it move forward.
Okay. Next in line, we have someone named Keenan. Before we bring Keenan live, though, we'll just give another reminder. *3 to get in line to ask your question. And remember, you can also, if you're watching the broadcast on spanberger.house.gov/live, you can also enter in your question, and we'll be able to see that online there. So, Keenan, you're live. Go ahead with your question.
Hi, good afternoon. I actually have two questions. My first question is if you can look into awarding companies who win contract with the government and they win contracts and then they out to hire people, but they're looking for people with clearance already. I'm wondering if you can look into, like, for companies who win contracts, maybe they can help sponsor new people get clearance. Especially living in Northern Virginia, it's hard to find good jobs without clearances. So, and my second question is there a way a civilian can see how much we spent on this Ukraine war?
All right. So Keenan, two questions, pretty different topics. So let me get to the first one first. The question was about government contractors who might be looking for employees with contracts, and those that have the ability government contracts and looking for employees with security clearances, and those who might have the ability to sponsor security clearances. The specifics of how a company becomes able to sponsor someone for security clearance is not something that I have focused on recently. So I'm going to have to dig into that question for you. But certainly, with so many jobs throughout the 7th District or in the nearby neighboring districts that do require security clearances, it's important that people entering the workforce ultimately be able to if they're eligible, presuming they're eligible, be able to get sponsorship for that clearance for them in the workforce. So let me follow up on that question. We'll make sure we have your information. And then related to kind of the transparency and accountability of funding for the war in Ukraine, at the end of last year, I was part of an effort to ensure that the end of year funding bill included measures related to transparency and accountability for the purpose of oversight in terms of the funding that we are sending to Ukraine. There's multiple components to it. Some is information sharing, which ultimately, the costs there are kind of borne out through the course of our regular intelligence collection. Some of it relates to communications capability. Some of it is our engagement with our partners and allies, both in leveraging sanctions against Russia, but also in facilitating the transfer of aid from our other partner nations to Ukraine. And then some of it is specific, dollars that we are spending to support the war in Ukraine with aid and lethal aid. And so our legislation last year was meant to ensure that there is greater transparency and accountability for the dollars that are spent and the support that is leveraged. And we'll have to pull what might be publicly available. Certainly, there will be elements of that and elements of the funding that's spent that may not be publicly available. But we'll pull whatever existing reports may be available preliminarily at this point and follow up with you directly. But that's an important question. And certainly, just to kind of reiterate the point, I am tremendously supportive of our American efforts to demonstrate global leadership in support of our Ukrainian allies, and in support of the nations that want to come together in supporting a country that has been horrifically invaded, that continues to do its own fighting for its own freedom. And I think the United States has demonstrated extraordinary leadership on the global stage, and that's something I'm incredibly proud of. I also think it's incredibly important that we continue to provide aid to the Ukrainians as they continue to wage this war for freedom at home for themselves. But I also do think that as we are doing that, it is important that we have transparency, certainly as lawmakers, but as the American people, into the funding that we are spending. Of course, outside of circumstances where that might be conveying information that might otherwise be classified. And that was the purpose of that legislation at the end of the year, to enhance that beyond even what it was before then. So thank you so much for your question, Keenan.
Yes, thanks. All right, we're not even halfway through our event yet, so remember, *3 on your phone's keypad if you'd like to get in line to ask a question. Obviously, you can type your question below the streaming player at the Congresswoman's website, and then remember *6. You'll be able to press *6 and give your email address to just stay a little closer in touch between these broadcasts with what's going on in Washington and with Congresswoman Spanberger. Next, we're going to go to an online question, someone that actually typed in a question below the broadcast. The person's name is Christopher. The question, Congresswoman, is there anything that can be done about the corruption on the Supreme Court, is this question.
So, Christopher, thank you for your question. And I'll follow up a little bit if you were listening as we were speaking earlier about the Trust in Congress Act. And so while the Trust in Congress Act is ethics reforms that apply specifically to members of Congress, certainly I think that it's our responsibility to get our own house in order, unslightly intended. I am also supportive of and co-sponsoring the Justice is Blind Act, which would require similar provisions placed onto members of the Supreme Court. That would require blind trusts for Supreme Court justices, and to ensure that they do not have the financial conflicts of interest. It is incredibly important that we have strong transparency, and certainly Justice Alito made very alarming comments somewhat recently questioning whether or not Congress gets to set parameters for the Supreme Court. And to that, certainly I haven't heard him complain when Congress weighs in on their pay scale. So it is absolutely Congress's place and obligation to weigh in on the ethics, the transparency, and the accountability that we expect out of our Supreme Court. And so one of the pieces of legislation there is the Justices Blind Act, that at a minimum would put greater provisions in place related to financial potential conflicts of interest. And so that's, I think, an important first step related to, working to, just as I'm trying to restore a bit more trust in our legislative body, I think there have certainly been far too many stories of late, outside of whether you agree with or disagree with certain Supreme Court rulings. There have been far too many stories of late that really call into question the level of accountability that exists as it relates to their financial disclosures, and whether there are conflicts of interest. And that's an important piece, certainly, that I think we have to get right. Make sure that, whether you agree with the decision or not agree or don't agree with the decision, we need to be able to trust that individuals are free of financial influence or free of conflict when they are making those choices. And there's a long way to go to get to the point where the general public securely feels that way.
Thank you, Christopher, for that question. Next, we are going to move to James. James has a question about Social Security, and we'll go ahead and bring James live. You are live.
Yes, good evening, Congresswoman. I know there's a lot of federal employees that are listening, and we'd like to have an update on the bill that I know was introduced in the House I don't know if it's passed yet. I know it has enough supporters, and hopefully it'll pass the House and then it goes to the Senate. So I'd just like to have an update on that, and what you think the prognosis for that is.
And James, I'm going to you mentioned federal employee and Social Security, so I'm going to go with this is the Social Security Fairness Act that you are interested in learning about, or the current status. For those on the line who may not have heard me talk about this in the past, this comes up at every single telephone town hall we have, because the Social Security Fairness Act is necessary for so many of the people who I have the privilege of representing. There is in current law, individuals who retired as public servants, and the most impacted retired teachers, retired firefighters, retired police officers, and retired federal employees are subject to what's called the government pension offset, or the windfall elimination provision. And these two provisions essentially reduce the Social Security payment that the retirees I mentioned receive. They pay in the same amount that had they, chosen a job in the private sector. They pay in throughout their working years, and when they retire, they see their Social Security payments reduced to the tune of hundreds of dollars. And it is a major impact. It is absolutely unfair. And again, they are paying in at the same level that they would had they worked somewhere else. But when they retire, because of the choices they made as public servants, they are impacted. So we have legislation. It's called the Social Security Fairness Act that I have co-led since I first got to Congress. It is bipartisan. I lead it with Garrett Graves, a Republican from Louisiana. And we are currently at 288 co-sponsors. Reminder for those who might be a couple years away from their civics classes, 218 when everybody's present and voting is what it takes to pass something in the House of Representatives. We are at 288 co-sponsors, not just people who would support it with a vote, but co-sponsors, people who are putting their name on it. We have a rule within the House that if you hit 290, you can force a vote to the floor. I am very excited about the prospects of this bill. We are at 288. We're two people away from being able to force a vote on the House floor. We also have made it clear, Congressman Graves and I have made it clear to the committees of jurisdiction that we would like for them to move this through regular order. It has so much incredible bipartisan support, and anybody who watches any amount of television knows that we're going through a bit of a divisive time in politics. 288 members of Congress support this legislation because it is just what is fair and right for retired public servants. And so I'm hoping it will go through the committee process. We've made it clear that's our expectation. But if not, we're two people away from being able to force a vote. Last Congress, we hit the 290 mark right at around the end of the fiscal year of that second year of the Congress. So we are a year ahead of schedule in terms of the pace that we've been able to keep, which is why I am so optimistic. My goal is to get this passed ideally by the end of the year, and then spend all next year rattling things over on the Senate side to make sure they pass it and get it to the president's desk. It's an issue of basic fairness. It just makes sense. And if you know anyone who's a federal retiree impacted by this, or a retired police officer, retired teacher, retired firefighter, retired public servant, I promise you this is a huge issue. It's one of fairness, and we just got to fix it. And that's what we're going to do. And so we are really, I think we've made tremendous progress thus far this year, and we are not letting up on it.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Remember, *3 will get you in line to ask a question. That is *3 on your phone's keypad. And again, if you're watching at spanberger.house.gov/live, you can type in your question in the chat box beneath the player, the broadcast there. And then *6, you can get in line, give your email, sign up for e-newsletter. All right, next we're going to go to Lewis, question about electric vehicles. Lewis, you're live.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I want to thank the Congresswoman for allowing me to be on this call, and thank her for her service to the state of Virginia. My question is, I'm with a company that provides EV charging stations across the country and actually across the world. They're in 70 countries international. And I know that there was a bipartisan agreement that was passed that in 10 years there will be 35,000 new EV vehicles on the road. And so what my job is to provide places or stations where we can put these charging stations up and so people can access these charging stations. So I know in Virginia they have like commuters lots, public travel, transportations, where possibly we could put these charging stations where people can buy new cars as part of the green initiative. But my problem I'm having is because this is a new initiative, people don't know my name when I go and solicit them for possible put up these charging stations. So I need some backing with a named person to kind of help push this initiative where we can provide the service for the people that want to buy electric vehicles, but because there's not a lot of charging stations, it's a very slow process. So if I can get some backing, maybe from you or somebody that you know that could guide me in the right direction, that we could provide this service for people in Virginia. I really appreciate it.
Louis, thank you for your question, and certainly thank you for your work. Just to comment a little bit on what you were talking about with the bipartisan infrastructure law that President Biden signed into law almost 2 years ago at this point. We have made tremendous progress. We've seen billions of dollars come to Virginia in infrastructure money for broadband, roads, bridges, water infrastructure, and Virginia is already benefiting. And the important thing, and then I'll get to the EV charging station element of it. An important element of this is that there's also funding to ensure the strength of our electrical grid and our EV charging infrastructure. Importantly, as we've heard, and serving on the Agriculture Committee, we've actually had leadership from large U.S. manufacturers come before the Agriculture Committee and talk about the choices that they are making in pivoting some of their production to electric vehicles. And they're making those choices for business reasons. And it's to be both responsive to consumers and their view of what they see as the future of demand. But that demand requires that infrastructure be there along the way. And where there has been a place, or where there needs to be a place for government engagement, is those EV charging stations are part of the larger electrical grid. And so recognizing the need to strengthen our electrical grid to build resiliency as one priority, but then also to make sure that it is responsive to the needs of consumers along the way, whether they're consuming electricity for their home or while they're out commuting and charging their vehicle. There are federal dollars to spur what you're talking about with private investment and private business priorities. So we're happy to follow up, and I'll get you a little bit of information about some of the federal priorities and federal dollars that exist there, for localities, for communities that choose to use them to expand their grid, bring resiliency, but then also expand their access to electric vehicle charging stations. As a representative for suburban, urban, and very rural communities, we also want to make sure that where these might be placed is benefiting community members, certainly ensuring that if someone's going to be on the road, coming from Washington, D.C., driving through the beautiful 7th District, that perhaps rather than just getting off the road, charging and keep on moving, that they might stop in some of the great towns that we have along the way, spend some of their dollars, experience the local community, and then continue on. So towns and localities throughout Virginia have some really interesting possibilities for ways that they can bring investments in where they choose to potentially put some vehicle charging stations along the way. So it's good to hear that there's vibrant businesses working on that. And Lewis will provide a bit more information about what we passed, as that might help guide you or understand what might be available into the future for you. Thanks so much.
All right, we're a little over halfway through the broadcast, and remember, there's plenty of time to press *3 on your phone's keypad to get in line to speak with the Congresswoman. *3 on your phone's keypad. We're going to bounce back to the online question, people that were watching the broadcast, and a gentleman, Stu. The name is Stu, Congresswoman, and their question, well, they say this. I was deeply appreciative of your visitation of farms in our region this past week. Are you concerned by loss of farmland and green space to sustain farming in our region? And can we achieve a balance with development?
Stu, thanks for the question. And for those who might have missed my beginning remarks, I spent a fantastic day yesterday in Caroline and King George counties, visiting a variety of farms across those two counties. I regularly do farm tours. I'm grateful to every producer who lets me walk their fields or see their sites and really hear directly from them. As the only Virginian on the Agriculture Committee, it is incredibly important that I hear directly from the producers I represent, particularly this year in a Farm Bill year. But Stu's question was about the loss of farmland. And I'll say, the challenges that we face in this country, but particularly in Virginia, and most especially, I think, within the 7th District, is that we have so much growth, we have so much development, we have so many people who want to live within our region. And many of those neighborhoods and many of those areas at one point in time were farmland. And the impact on Virginia agriculture of our growth is one that does create real challenges. And so, yes, I do have real concerns because the impact on our growers is significant. I spoke with one couple yesterday. They are farming and they are newer farmers. And they rent land from, they have 35 separate parcels of land. All told, it's about 1,100 acres that they farm. And of those 35 different plots of land, more than 20 different landlords, because they're renting acreage here and acreage there, because in between and all around, neighboring acreage, land that used to be in production is becoming neighborhoods, is becoming developed land. They've just lost a couple acres to development that will eventually hold a large store, and the impact on what that means for their operation, what that means for their income, what that means for them as a family, and their future in farming is one that is clear. They're an amazing family committed to their work as producers, but certainly these are challenges that are facing agriculture across the board, but particularly in regions like ours. So yes, I am very concerned. And some of the things that I'm doing about it is making sure that, where we can have access to capital for newer and beginning farmers to be able to enter the field to buy, or the field of farming, or to be able to take over an operation from a loved one, to buy out an aging relative. The list of how one might become a farmer goes on and on. But for them to be able to begin that process is incredibly important. And there are a lot of hurdles that exist in front of new and beginning farmers, just as there are a lot of hurdles that exist for people who have been farming for years and years and years, where they are seeing encroachment of land. And so while they might own a substantial amount of the land that they farm, they might also rent land in addition. And when the owner of that land decides to sell to a neighborhood, it ultimately decreases. The challenge, and some of this is a land use issue, some of this is a local issue, but certainly as a federal legislator and a representative for communities so impacted, what I am focused on is making sure that those who want to continue farming, those who are able to continue farming, have access to the capital that they need, have the ability and the flexibility to make that choice so that no one is forced out. But also recognizing that local communities can make smart choices in the development plans that they make community by community to both kind of honor and recognize the value of their agricultural history and the day-to-day value of the production of uh, grains and food and livestock that feed their neighbors. And I think the more that we start to really recognize that, a county this way or a county that way, particularly within the 7th District or within Virginia, we are highly connected to agricultural land. And, agriculture continues to be Virginia's #1 private industry. And so making sure that we are clear on maintaining ag lands is not just about a particular farmer's experience, but it is actually about our Commonwealth's economy. And so that continues to be a priority. And Stu, I think I could continue to talk about this issue at length, but basically, from a federal standpoint, ensuring access to capital, ensuring the ability of producers to be able to rent or buy land is a priority. Ensuring that there are programs such as conservation programs or crop insurance programs that provide them extra flexibility in how they utilize those lands, how they take care of the land, how they tend to the soil health, also bringing major important impact to the health of our waterways or to the cause of sequestering carbon from our environment, and that when they might have a hard year, that crop insurance is there and available to help them work through it. Those are some of my priorities for the Farm Bill, because it gets at this very issue where, if someone is ultimately choosing to stay in farming, they have some of the tools, both support from the federal government through these programs to be able to do so. But some of the land development questions then become, a discussion that certainly federal, state, and local officials need to be hopefully having in tandem as those local decisions about how to zone and how to grow at a way that does preserve Virginia's agriculture, but also recognize the needs of our community for housing for the folks who want to live in our great state.
Let's next go to Craig, a question that appears to be about Veterans Affairs. But remember, press *3 on your phone's keypad to get in line to ask a question. *3 on your phone's keypad will put you in line to speak with the Congresswoman. Craig, you are live. Go ahead with your question.
Thank you. Good evening. Thanks for taking my question.
Okay.
In general, I guess my question is really about the wait time for veterans in terms of resolving their claims for disability. And I'm not sure whether or not there's a congressional solution for this or whether or not this is merely a staffing matter. But I must say that everyone would probably agree that it's unacceptable that veterans are waiting 2, 3, up to 5 years to get a claim that is resolved, that is on appeal at the VA after it's been either denied or, they haven't gotten the outcome that they've been looking for. And again, I believe that wait time might be due to the lack of staffing at Veterans Affairs, but if more attention can be brought to this, I'm sure that, something can be done, because something most certainly should be done.
Craig, are you a veteran?
Yes, I am. I actually, I'm a veteran and a lawyer. I was a judge advocate in the Marine Corps, and right after 9/11, I'm in the Virginia area. And as you can imagine, there are so many veterans in the Virginia area, but throughout the country in general as well. And as an attorney, I've helped individuals in terms of working on their claims and kind of getting through that process. But it just seems to be completely unacceptable that people have to wait a number of years to get a resolution to claims that they've submitted. And many of them are in financial dire straits and really need some type of response in order to plan their future going forward.
Well, Craig, I want to thank you for your service, certainly in the Marine Corps, but also for your continued advocacy on behalf of other veterans You really named the challenge straight off the bat. A major issue is staffing. A major issue is the rate at which these claims are reviewed. And, there are every individual case is different, but some of the common themes are, and I think everyone would agree, representing a district with so many veterans, I feel quite comfortable saying I've yet to meet someone who says the VA reviewed my claim too quickly. And I'll eat my hat if anyone ever says that to me. But the reality is that veterans are waiting too long in dire straits, in dire financial straits, depending upon the type of claim they have. It impacts their ability to work, obviously. And frankly, when we're looking at larger scale issues related to veteran homelessness, veteran mental health challenges, veteran suicide, the faster we can ensure that veterans who might have a disability claim or who might have a health claim are able to make those claims quicker and faster is important. So here, I do not necessarily have a fix. I wish that I did. It is a staffing, it is a paperwork, there is a backlog from COVID, all of these, which as I hear myself saying them, I know those are excuses / explanations, but I will say for anyone who's listening, please call our office. We have a team of people who are focused on constituent services. At the beginning, I said that we had $33 million in money pushed back to constituents, owed to constituents. A lot of that comes in VA claims, claims that took a while to go through that we were able to help. We don't have the ability to change what will be the ultimate decision made in a veteran's case, but certainly we have had a lot of success in making sure that that paperwork doesn't fall through the cracks, that a claim is reviewed. We have assisted constituents as they have disputed or tried to get their paperwork amended. And then notably, we also have a great working relationship with the Virginia Department of Veteran Services. And so in the cases where we can be of service, we will do that. At times when a veteran might be better served by working directly with DVS local to them, we will make sure that someone is set up directly with the DVS member who can help them. So you can contact our office, spanberger.house.gov. We have our phone number on the website, or you can submit something online. Any veteran listening, please, please, please do be in touch. I also want to make sure that anyone who might have toxic exposure related illnesses, and I want to highlight the Honoring Our Pact Act, which is legislation that we pushed through, got signed into law, for the purpose of making sure that veterans who are experiencing a variety of illnesses that are well documented and known to be linked to potential toxic exposures, particularly like those that veterans who were exposed to burn pits in Iraq and Afghanistan might have faced. That legislation gives an automatic presumption of service-connected illness for 23 known illnesses linked to the exposures that veterans might have faced because of burn pits. That legislation also provides updated guidance and finally support to those who might have had exposure to Agent Orange. So you can go to va.gov/PACT, so PACT, like honoring our pact, va.gov/PACT, to be able to get information and sign up. It's important that anyone who might be eligible sign up there. There is no limit to it in the long term, but if you are eligible in the here or now, early this month, there is a deadline for anyone who wants retroactive for the past year claims paid out. So just want to make sure people know about that. But again, any veteran on the line, Craig, I wish I had a kind of 1-minute solution to the problem you raised, but I want to make sure I hear you loud and clear. And that's why we have such a attentive team working to support veterans and making sure that where we can be of service, we are, or where we can connect them with the right individuals to help, we're doing that and making sure that they have information. And hopefully the Honoring Our Pact Act should ultimately be meant to streamline some of the processes for veterans. I will say that we are seeing significant uptake, which is important, of veterans who did have exposures entering the system and making those claims. So the legislation is doing exactly what it was intended to do, which is it's bringing more people in, making sure they know what they might be eligible for if they have toxic related exposures or toxic exposure related illnesses. But that is ultimately should streamline the system, but it is bringing a lot more people in and part and parcel of some of the challenges that we've seen as of late, which adds to long-term challenges and delays at the VA.
Okay, next we're going to hear from Barry, a question about possible broadband implementation into the infrastructure. So let's bring him live, and Barry, you should be live now.
Yes, I am. Hello, Abigail,
Hello.
and you're doing a great job. Keep it up.
Thank you.
The question I have, and I'm going to kind of label it as fiber broadband deserts. Basically, Verizon has been laying cable in our neighborhood, and basically on our road, it came basically to our spur road and stopped. So basically, we have no, files access. And the question I have, I realize, I'm from Culpeper, and they've got a grant, I think, with All Points Broadband, but it seems against any common business sense why that company will basically leapfrog what Verizon has done to service one road with 6 people on it. And Verizon has basically provided service for people on roads as long as ours with fewer residents. So it just is very confusing how this happened, but it has. And I guess the ultimate question, has Verizon, do they have any access to infrastructure money? Or are they doing this on their own dime?
So I'm going to begin by answering your direct question, which is I don't believe so, but I'll have to check on that. But I don't believe so. Infrastructure money in terms of laying, in terms of infrastructure projects. Separately, we do have some federal programs related to affordability that customers in service areas that might be serviced by Verizon could use. But in terms of what you're talking about, overall access to begin with, I don't believe so. I'll double check on that. So I want to make 2 comments. First, specific to your issue, Barry, I want to have my team follow up with you because we've been tracking a lot of the broadband projects throughout our district. And so I would love to follow up directly with you and learn a little bit more about the specifics of your circumstance and where you are in Culpeper. But, overall, so there might be some specifics. We would love to dig into your actual issue. So I'll make sure that the team has your contact information and we'll learn a little bit more about your situation. But kind of a broader scale discussion, since I was first elected, I've been prioritizing access to broadband connectivity and, well before the pandemic, and we saw how vital it was in so many ways. There is a disconnect between communities that have access to broadband and those that don't. Broadband's necessary to business, it's necessary to education, it's necessary to sort of the very function of a community, which is why within the infrastructure bill, we put significant federal investments meant to kind of jumpstart projects locally. Those federal investments bringing additional local dollars to be able to deliver broadband connectivity, because the companies on their own might not always have the direct financial incentive to bring broadband everywhere. And much like with the electrification of the United States a century ago, there was a place and there is a place for federal investments to bring and attract and partner with local dollars to bring in that service. And what you're talking about is the question of the last mile, where even in places where there might be a business interest, you might see a Verizon or somebody else coming into a community, but then not going far enough. And so this is something that I hear about regularly. and which is why I want to follow up with you specifically, because from time to time we've seen that sometimes it's a challenge within a particular locality, sometimes it's an alleged business decision, and we'd love to work with you to kind of get some answers about what's happening in your area. But just kind of overall in the broadband question, so far $1.5 billion of investment, federal dollars, have come into Virginia to then partner with local dollars and support. And that's actually just from the infrastructure law. Before that, as part of the American Rescue Plan, federal support went to Virginia, and Virginia, I think, very wisely put that money towards the VADI program, which is also incredibly active across so many communities in the 7th and the rest of the Commonwealth to bring internet. So more of a general answer, but Barry, to speak to your particular specific issue, I want to make sure we have your contact.
Okay, and then press *3 if you'd like to get in line to ask a question. We're running a little short on time, but there still might be some time for you to get in line. And next, we're going to go to Ibrahim. Question about child tax credits. You're live.
Okay. Well, first off, let me just say, my VA claim was resolved in like 7 months, so that was way too fast for me. Anyway,
I'm glad someone's happy with the speed of their claim.
No, I mean, 7 months, I guess that was reasonable, all things considered. I was out in November, and then, I managed to get my first check this month, so progress.
Wow.
But my question was actually about the child tax credits. I know there's some conflict going back and forth between the Republican version versus the Democratic version of that bill, at least last I heard.
Yeah.
My question was, is there any possible resolution towards that? And does that make any difference to, like, Virginia state taxes?
So let me speak briefly to the child tax credit is something that was spoken about a lot in the early days of the pandemic. For those with children at home, you likely remember that families with children within a certain family income range received a refundable tax credit. And so that was an upfront check in the mail for a number determined based on how many children are at home and based on the family income. And then the rest of the money, depending upon the tax filings, the rest of the money, the second half of the year for that child tax credit amount was calculated and provided at the time that people file taxes in April. And what was special about the way that we did it during COVID is it was refundable. So depending upon someone's financial circumstance, it was refundable and it was advanced. So it was dollars in the pockets of families. And what we saw, I mean, the data show is that child poverty went down significantly. And the reduction was approximately a 40% reduction in child poverty. When you look at the numbers related to the correlations between child poverty and child hunger, and child poverty and performance in school, and child poverty and outcomes and earning potential later in that individual's life, that child's life, the data show that there are significant benefits to ensuring that parents have a tax credit for their children that's usable. And that's what we did with making it refundable and also advancing it over the summer months. So many Democrats continue to support putting a refundable child tax credit back in place. Many of us voted to do just that, and I am one of them. But ultimately, we did not get it across the finish line. I continue to support in principle, and I say in principle because I'm open to any version of a bill that could get the support necessary to pass the House, the Senate, get the president's desk, where there's a refundable tax credit. I'm happy to have conversations about what would be the income thresholds, what would be the amounts, but making those child tax credits usable and available to families, and not just potentially a little bit of a reduction around tax time is an important priority. I will say that there is some bipartisanship here. Certainly, Mitt Romney, a Republican in the Senate, has in principle some strong support of versions of a child tax credit where it would be more usable for families. Unfortunately, that same level of support isn't as prominent in the House of Representatives. So, speaking a little bit about what the program has been, it was there in place during COVID. It expired. We tried to extend it. We're not able to do so. We're not able to get that bill to the president's desk. But the conversation continues. To answer your question about like what's the real possibility of getting that enacted, I think that at this current moment in time, I don't see that I don't see a clear path to getting an improved or refundable child tax credit back into law, even though we saw the very clear benefits of it. I'll continue to advocate for it. Again, the principle of it is what I support. So I'm happy to have conversations with any lawmakers kind of across the political spectrum about how to enact that into the long term in a way that really benefits families, most importantly benefits children, and makes good use of the tax policy and provision in the way that it's supposed to. But to kind of the core of your question, Ibrahim, is I don't see that I don't see that on the horizon as an element of legislation headed to the president's desk. And I hope I'm wrong.
Hey, thank you so much. All right. So, well, we're kind of reaching the top of the hour, or the bottom of the hour, I guess you could say. Just a few more items. There's obviously lots of questions that we got to, but there are dozens and dozens more that we didn't. So feel free to hang on the line and leave a message. Obviously, the staff will be able to review those voicemails. And then, obviously, I would like to turn it over to Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger for closing remarks, but thank you so much for being with us.
Ryan, thanks for moderating today. I want to make sure that anyone on the line, if you have any additional questions, please leave a message. We'll have someone call you back. We'll make sure that we answer your question. Thanks for joining us. I hope you'll join us for the next one. Also want to make sure that anyone on the line signs up for our newsletter at spanberger.house.gov. We send that out once a week. Updates what's happening across the district, what's happening on Capitol Hill, give overviews of legislation, priorities. We don't send too much, I promise, but what we do send is valuable and is meant to keep you updated. For people out there, I really appreciate you joining. Thanks for joining the town hall. We had an array of questions, everything from VA issues to land use policy, agriculture in Virginia, ethics reforms, which I care so deeply about, Social Security related legislation. And so thank you for joining. Thank you for your questions. If we didn't get to your question, we look forward to following up with you. And please, for anyone on the line, if you're having any challenges with the federal agency, Social Security, OPM, the VA, Medicare, please be in touch with our office. It is our job to try and help you, support you, answer your questions, and make sure that you know that somebody is listening. So I hope that we are able to help you. If you have a challenge, please feel free to tell your friends and neighbors. They can call their local congresswoman with any questions that they might have. And for any updates on our legislative work or work across the district, please sign up for our newsletter. Thank you so much for joining. It is an honor. It is a pleasure. And I am deeply grateful for the opportunity to represent you. I appreciate you joining us tonight and look forward to the next one. Thank you so much. Have a good evening and everyone stay safe.